so much. Thank you so much. And thank you for the invitation. And sorry for not being able to present my talk in person. So it would not be an exaggeration to say that modern works related to the analysis of language and literature, they deal with corpora. And corpora, they have become a necessary condition for such studies. However, most corpora, they are focused on modern language, and historical texts, they remain out of scope of attention mostly. For example, church hymns and other texts dealing with church tradition. Of course, there are various indices and reference books, materials, but they are fragmented and are also difficult to access. Also, we need to mention that in most cases, we do not have access to text in electronic form, so the task of the searching, scanning, and recognizing arises. In our study, we like to make the first attempt to create a corpus for German Catholic tradition. For these purposes, to study this liturgical tradition. And we know that hymn tradition, it is important and it should be studied and analyzed. So the ways we propose to do it, to analyze at least 2 editions of Gotteslob. Gotteslob from 1975 and 2013. The first edition existed previously and was used everywhere in Germany, while the second one exists nowadays and is being used nowadays now. So the related work, of course, we can name a number of projects that to a certain degree are similar to our work. For instance, Deutsche Diachron Digital, diachronic corpora of the German language, from Old German to early modern High German. And this project, it brought together researchers from 15 universities and research institutes in Germany to create such a variety of diachronic corpora. Then we can name Deutsches Textarchiv, which consists of 2 parts, and also it has this diachronic part. Then we should mention Po Emma corpus. This corpus contains German and English poetic texts with annotation for aesthetic emotions. And this project is of importance due to its nature, because it do not only comprise these diachronic texts, but also they studied with computational methods, for instance, sentiment analysis. Then the corpus of German poetry in New High German, it should be mentioned also. Then the project Berliner Repertorium. This project comprises medieval German translations of Latin liturgical songs from the 9th up to the early 16th centuries. Then we should mention an ambitious project, Mainzer Gesangbuchsarchiv, and this project should contain at least 8,000 units, but it is only in its initial stage of preparation and digitization. Hence, we should admit that there is no specialized corpora of German language liturgical poetry, and so there is a need in such a corpus. So this corpus will have 2 books, two kind of material, Gotteslob 1975, that covers the period from the Middle Ages up to the 17th. Then this corpus will be supplemented with the results of the analysis from the second edition of nowadays, and the stages of processing, they include not only preparation, but also metadata annotation, tokenization, and morphological and syntactic analysis. The selected hymns belong to the genre of so-called Kinderlied, and these are church chants that are the core part of the hymns. And these two books, these two sources, they help us to study this living tradition. The first one that represents living connections between the cultures, and the second one, its current state. In Gotteslob 1975, we use all hymns from its core part, not the original one, and mark the ones, annotate the ones that are absent in the second edition. And vice versa, in the second edition, we mark only new hymns that were not present in the first edition, and it helps us to understand what disappeared and what was invented. Here in the table, you can see a number of examples for corpus statistics. For instance, our corpus comprises more than 200 hymns and about 33,000 tokens. Yeah? It's not so much, but for such a corpus, it's pretty good. Yeah? Then we used our own schema for annotation, and the first parameter I'd like to talk about is hymn ID. This is the number in the book, which in the traditional annotation schema in the corpus corresponds to a text title. In our case, we don't have this text title, but we have this hymn ID. Then we, as I have already mentioned, we mark the hymns that are present in one edition and not in another. So the hymns that disappeared and the hymns that are present only in one book. Here you can see an example of such annotation of a strophe ID, strophe year, and strophe original. I will talk about a bit later, and also the example of such a hymn in German. Then the parameter hymn year, the year of creation of the hymn as a whole. And this year is determined in two ways. By Gotteslob dating, which is indicated, but also we cross-checked against available editions, so to be sure that this date, this year, is a proper one. Up to statistics, the longest hymns that include more than 300 words, they come from the second half of the 20th century, the 16th century, the 17th century, and the 18th century. And the shortest hymns date mainly from the 16th century, so you can trace this difference up to year of their creation. Then the invented parameter, hymn ancestor, it deals with the fact that we pay attention whether it was the original text that was subjected to editorial revision or new stanzas were added to it. So in this case, the parameter indicates whether the ancestor text exists or not. So this logical parameter, yes or no. The majority of hymns have no preceding text. More than 91% do not have it. Then hymn category, and this is actually the century of hymn creation. Before the 16th century, 16th century, 17th century, 18th, 19th, and the first or second half of the 20th century. And here on the diagram, you can see that the majority of hymns they were written in the second half of the 20th century and also in the 17th century. Here is an example. Then the parameter hymn category number 2. So we take into account the musical accompaniment. So the texts were divided into 2 groups. The first category, T plus M, and it means that the musical arrangement corresponded to the time of creation of the text itself. Or category T, namely text only, so the text received a completely different musical arrangement, usually from a later period. Here we should mention that more than half of the hymns, about 60%, have musical accompaniment created during the period when the text was written, but also about 40% they belong to this category only too, so the musical arrangement was added later. And also, we assume that the division into time categories may also correspond to the correlation of hymn texts by significant cultural and historical periods. For example, Middle Ages, Reformation, Baroque, historicism, Renaissance in Germany, or the time of the Federal Republic of Germany, so nowadays. And also we tried to trace this correspondence between the year of this hymn and this period, and also the interrelation between the text itself and text and music. Okay? And this our proposed annotation you can see in the table. Then one more parameter, hymn rubric, and in this parameter, it helps us to understand the interrelation between the year of hymn and its content. And the liturgical rubric, so the theme of this hymn. This division already existed in the hymn book, but it doesn't correspond to the time of the church year in some cases. So we needed to make such an expert classification. And then we added additionally to this initial classification that was used in Gotteslob, also this expert classification. And here you can see that, for example, the eve of Easter already refers to Easter time, but it should be named in a different way, according to our expert annotation. So this
5 minutes left.
Yeah, thank you. Then strophe, this parameter marks the strophe number within the hymn, and we should mention that there is a variety of hymns according to the number of strophes, from 1 up to 15 strophes. And for example, one hymn consists of the maximum number of strophes, 15, and it dates back to the second half of the 20th century. Then also it was mentioned hymn original. Also, we should study the originality of strophe itself, and a hymn may consist of the strophes from different time periods. So original, yes, and the strophes that were added later, no. Most of the strophes are original, as you can see. Then the parameter strophe year, it indicates the year when the strophe was written. Here we should mention that the 20th century prevails because the strophes were written and added to the rest of hymns during this period. And to the conclusion, we should say that we present the first results of creating such a corpus. And this corpus allows us to embrace the tradition of liturgical hymnography. The corpus of text is not an end in itself. The first edition we mentioned, 1975, contains a great number of introduced material, of new material, and it is based on the traditions of historicism of the second half of the 19th century, which in turn draws back to the Counter-Reformation. So this edition, it expresses this movement in post-war Germany, and we should admit that it is quite interesting to study this hypothesis, and the corpus in future will be supplemented by verse annotation. Thank you very much for your attention.